All right, my name's Teresa Hunter. I'm 62 years old. I retired 4 months ago. I've been doing nursing for 35 years. Why is nursing my profession? My parents decided in high school that that's the kind of courses I would take, and that was the goal, to be a nurse. Although for me it was my goal was to be either an airline stewardess or a nurse, and I chose nursing on my own as well. It gave me a lifetime of being able to support myself and of being able to help people. I did home care nursing, so I went into people's homes and helped them with whatever. A lot of times it was after surgeries or after they've been diagnosed with a new illness. So I was able to do a lot of teaching and give a lot of things to them that they might have not gotten in the hospital otherwise. Mainly seniors, 65 and older, but we did a lot of contract with like Aetna and Blue Cross and things like that, so and the health department, so we did have young people as well, younger than 65.
So if you had to say that nursing taught you like something significant, what was the most like?
Well, I think basically, well, you know, you have to have a certain amount of compassion, and I learned to have more compassion, and I became a good listener, because most people really all they want is somebody to listen to them and to care about them. And so that's, I think, that was something very important that I learned early on. Where I grew up? I grew up in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio. But I left Dayton when I got married and moved to Buffalo, New York. And actually, about 3 months after I moved to New York, we came to Florida and started from scratch. Basically, I came to Florida with the clothes on my back and $500 and found a place to live and a job in the first week that I lived in Florida. So it's easy to establish yourself in Florida. I'd always wanted to come to Florida because I had been here on vacation one time, and I'd never seen palm trees or the beach or this much sunshine, so I thought it'd be a cool place to live, and so that's why I ended up here. Oh my Lord. My husband and I met each other in a therapy group and a lot of us were adult children of alcoholics or had other addictions, and so our group started out actually as a group of women. It was a support group for the women, and at the time my mother was dying. She was living with me and she was dying, and so I needed a lot of support. So I joined a support group, and then the counselor added men at some point, and so that's how I met my husband. My first date actually was on my husband's birthday. He invited me to his house for dinner, and what I didn't know is he was a vegetarian at the time, so when he told me that we were going to have pasta, I was thinking, you know, pasta with red sauce and meatballs and all that kind of stuff, and we had pasta with broccoli and carrots. So when I left his home, I went straight to McDonald's to get a hamburger. But I didn't want to tell him that because I didn't want to insult him. But anyway, we've been married for 22 years. This in a couple weeks, actually. March 6th. Well, I've learned, I think I've learned how to have a relationship, and I've learned a lot about love. I grew up with parents that were not the best role models for how to have a relationship. So my husband and I belong to a 12-step program, and we go to a couples group called Recovering Couples Anonymous. And so both of us actually have learned by going to this group about how to have a relationship and the characteristics of it. And we share with other couples on a regular basis, and we go to retreats, things like that. So it has helped us to have a better relationship and to survive the ups and downs that you go through in any typical marriage. So Kurt and I, one year we went to a retreat, and we did what you call the ropes course, or it's also called the challenge course. And one of the main things that we were asked to do, and it's by choice, and this one thing, I have a fear of heights. Well, so I was asked to climb up a 30-foot pole and go out on a high wire and then fall backwards off the high wire as a test of true grit, I guess, courage. Anyway, we did this together as a couple, and I remember climbing up the pole thinking, okay, if I get up there and I freak out, I'll just come back down. Well, the facilitators told me later that once you get up there, you don't come back down, you go out on the high wire. So anyway, Kurt and I went up on the high wire together, and you know, it involves a certain amount of trust, because you kind of have to balance each other and help each other so you don't fall off the high wire. And of course you've got a safety harness on in case you do fall, because that can happen. But anyway, we successfully went out on the high wire together and helped each other to balance on it, and then we both fell backwards off of this high wire in our harnesses. And when I came down to the ground, I felt like I could do anything, you know. And and what it's supposed to do is help you to build trust with your partner, because you have to trust that you're gonna help each other. So anyway, well, I was born in 1951, so I grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, yeah. Sunshine, go away today. I actually don't remember much about the 50s. I grew up with my aunt. Her and I were the same age. We were like a month apart. Well, my grandmother and my mother were pregnant at the same time, at least 2 and probably 3 times that I can recall. So I have 2 uncles that are younger than I am, and an aunt that is the same age as I am. And her and I spent a lot of time together growing up. We went to the same schools. And so I did grow up in a family where we were closer knit than most, and I thought it was normal to have an aunt that was the same age as I am. My mother had 13, my mother was one of 13 brothers and sisters in her family, so we had a lot of family just on my mom's side. So growing up in the 50s, the thing I remember the most is spending time with my aunt and going to the same schools, and I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed being family and, you know, going over to Grandma's house and eating chicken and noodles that she made from scratch, and pasta that she made from scratch. She planted a garden, and so she would can a lot of her own, like, vegetables and jellies and things like that. So it was kind of an old-fashioned type of family at that point. Well, I went to high school in the late 60s. I graduated in 1969. And the Vietnam War was going on at that time. but I can't say I was real aware of it because I was in high school, so I was more interested in, you know, seeing how many proms I could go to and, you know, going to homecoming and that type of thing. So my husband is a Vietnam veteran, and so my experience of it is more from watching what he goes through. He has joined a veterans group, and he gets his medical care from the VA. And so he is in his 60s, like I am, and he still suffers the effects of wartime as PTSD, yes. And so he belongs to a group that deals with that. So at one point, my husband and I decided that we wanted to get an RV, so we did. And we basically quit our jobs because I was in my 50s at the time, in my late 50s, and so we wanted to do this journey before we got older and had health issues that maybe would prevent us from doing what we wanted to do. So we decided to quit our jobs. We bought an RV and we set a date, and we started out full-time RVing. And we had only been out in an RV maybe one weekend before that, so we didn't have a lot of experience. We went to the RV shows every year in Tampa, Florida, just to, you know, go to some of the courses they had there and to look at RVs and just to mingle with the RV community. So we did that. But anyway, so we started out on our trip, and we decided that we would head straight up from Florida to the mountains. And I was pretty overwhelmed with the rig because we had a 37-foot fifth wheel, and, you know, connected to a truck, a 350 truck. And so it was like driving a semi. Even though I didn't drive it, I drove the truck, but I told my husband I couldn't drive the fifth wheel. It was something I would have had to take a course to do, and I just wasn't interested in driving it. I thought it was a little too much for me. So Kurt drove the fifth wheel. Anyway, we headed for the mountains, and I had a camping directory. I would get out and I would leaf through it, and depending on where we were at, we would find a place to spend the night or a couple nights or a week at a time. Anyway, we made it as far as the mountains, the Smoky Mountains, in North Carolina, and we started up into the mountains, and apparently we missed the sign that said no trucks over so many pounds. I can't remember, it might have been like 20,000 pounds, and we were probably 23,000 pounds. We were weighed down pretty heavy, as it turns out. But anyway, we had no business being on the mountain road because the mountain road was smaller than the RV, as it turns out. And we managed to make it up this road, and the road went around like this, like a spiral staircase, and traffic literally stopped because our RV took up a lane and a half going around these turns. And when you went around the turn, you could look over the side of the mountain and see that the drop was straight down. So I don't know why I was so calm, but I decided at the point that we started going around these turns that I needed to keep my eye on the line on the road, that if you crossed over it, you would go over the side of the mountain. So I watched that little white line as we went around them turns, and traffic stopped, and I think some of them backed up so we could get around the turns, and we made it up that damn mountain. Something we should never have done, and we won't ever do again, and we never did again, I can tell you. So anyway, that was our first experience going up into the mountains with our RV. So I feel very lucky to be alive today. Another time we were, and we were still up in the mountains. We were getting ready to leave the mountains, and we had to go up a hill to get out of this campsite, and it was all gravel. And we were told, you got to get a head start, and you really got to gun the engine and go for it. So we did that. We got a head start, thought we were going fast enough, and we made it halfway up this gravel hill, and we stalled. And we couldn't make progress any farther up this hill to get out of this campsite. And the rig started going sideways, and it was enough of a hill that we could fall over on the side. So we were pretty scared. Kurt put his foot on the brake, and we could feel the trailer pulling us backwards. We were literally going backwards down this hill, little by little. Well, the guy that owned the campground, he ran and grabbed some kind of small, what do you call them? You know, the farmer's tractor. He went and got a tractor that he had, but it was a small one. Anyway, so he hooked up his tractor to the front of our truck and drug us the rest of the way up the hill. I don't know how the hell he did it, but we did it. So we managed to get in some pretty tight circumstances along the way. Well, we went to Georgia, and we went to North Carolina up in the mountains, and we went to Ohio, because I had family there, spent some time there. So if we were somewhere where we had family or we knew somebody, we would spend at least a week. I think we spent a couple weeks in Ohio. We spent a couple weeks in the mountains. So, because we like to hike, so we did a lot of hiking in the mountains as much as we could. Spent time with family in Ohio. And then we decided to head west. We traveled for a year and a half full-time around the country. We went to Yellowstone National Park, which I'd never been to. It was absolutely otherworldly. To me, it was like what the country must have looked like 200 years ago, because the animals roamed free. There were bears and there were elk. There was buffalo, lots of birds. I mean, it was just a very wild wildlife area. And so we stayed there a couple weeks, and you could go somewhere different in the park every day. You could spend a month there and not see the whole park. They had geysers, you know, they had the steaming geysers and all that kinds of stuff. So there was different types of geographics in this park. Our goal was to go to as many national parks as we could. Yellowstone definitely was the top of the list. The Grand Canyon. Got to see the Grand Canyon once in your life. It's to me, it's a very spiritual place. And it's a place where you can just sit for hours and look at all the formations. We went up to Wyoming and into Montana. There's a national park up in Montana that we went to. And the animals there literally run through the parking lot. They had like rams, you know, with the curly horns, and they took us up in a bus, and we're in the parking lot, and the rams were running through the parking lot in a pack. It was like, whoa, did I just see that? And, you know, they had, you know, bears. Again, it was wild animals. You had to be very careful. My husband scared me sometimes because he wanted to go hiking by himself if I didn't want to go. And when you go up to the national park in Montana, it's not a good idea. I would only hike with a guide. And they only carry, I've never seen bear spray before. You buy bear spray that's in a canister, like a can of hairspray. That's how big it is. And you take that with you hiking, and that's how you would deflect a bear if you came across a bear, because those are grizzlies up there. So very dangerous. But Kurt went hiking one time by himself. I dropped him off at a point and came back with the truck and picked him up, and you know, he was fearless. Although he did tell me when he saw a bear scat that it gave him pause, you know. It's like, oh, should I be by myself? And they do have signs at the head of the trails that say, you know, dangerous, you know, you need to hike with somebody. So it was a very, it was a place I'd never, they have what they call the Going to the Sun Road there, and you can take a open air car. It's like a big limo, except it doesn't have a top. And you get in, everybody gets in this thing, and they take you on a little tour through the mountains there, because it's very rugged, and you really can't walk it and see everything. So that was one way to tour the national park there. And so we enjoyed that. And as I get older, you know, you realize how important family is to you, and that the time that you spend is limited because, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. So the most important person in my life was my mother. And my mother and I miss that a lot because she's been gone for a long time. But we did things like we'd go to the Salvation Army store and, you know, raid the Salvation Army together and go to lunch and things like that. But I was happy just to be with her. Some of my happiest days also are the days that I spent with my mother, just because she had a good sense of humor, and she taught me a lot about who I was and what's important in life. And so that was probably the most important person in my life. Yes, I was very close to my mother. And we had our ups and downs just like anybody else does, but for the most part I've always been close to my mother until she passed, and she's been gone for, gosh, 27 years now. So yeah, you can't replace that person that was important in your life. So. Well, I was the oldest in my family, and I actually feel like, well, I can't say, you know, by the time I was in high school, you know, the youngest ones were still very young, and I don't remember a lot about growing up with the youngest ones. I grew up with my two brothers. They were the closest in age to me. You know, again, we were a big family. So to me it was normal, you know. But I left home fairly early in the younger ones' lives, so I didn't grow up with the younger ones. I think one of the most important things that I know now that I wished I had known starting out in life was that I am good enough, and I'm smart enough, and I can go as far as I want to go in my education. Back then, I did go to school, but I started late, and you know, I managed to have a career in nursing, but I was smart enough that I could have kept going, and I could have been, you know, a nurse practitioner, I could have been a doctor. I was smart enough to do that, but I didn't know that back then. I know that now. And so what I would tell you is go as far as you can in your education, and know that you're smart enough and you're good enough, and you deserve all the good things in life that you can accomplish. Basically, you're enough. That's all you need to know, is you're enough.